come online. Starting, okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. We are live, I believe, and the video quality should be somewhat better. I still have the feeling that moving back to my home office is going to just work better than working here in my beautiful studio. My internet is all based in my house, and of course we're not as close to the signal as we could be. So that's why it's not perfectly flawless and ideal. Hoping that you guys have been able to connect here. And that you'll be able to connect to the chat so that we can just continue right the way we usually do. Let's see here. I'm just going to try to post that link to the live broadcast. And then we should be here. Oh, here we go. I just found the link. I'm going to share it on the chat page. Just letting everyone know. Okay, well, that's just a panic and a stressful thing for everybody. I'm sorry about that. We're just going to give it a minute and then we'll get started. Okay. And while we're waiting, this is being recorded so that you'll be able to watch the broadcast even if you didn't find it here on YouTube in real time. Today I wanted to continue the wonderful flower painting that I was able to do on the weekend at my flower workshop. And I had a really great time painting with a group of fellow watercolor lovers. And we focused on floral painting flowers. And one of the reasons I love painting flowers is because you really get to develop an eye for composition when you're painting florals, because we're thinking in terms of arranging the flowers in a pleasing way. It's not like a landscape where everything has to be just where you see it in your reference photo. So with flowers, you get a little bit of liberty to arrange them. So I'm gonna move right over to my painting surface. I know the video is still a little bit choppy, and so I figured we might as well just go right to my painting area where I won't be moving around quite so much. So I'm just gonna switch the camera over, and then we'll be all set to do some painting. Just bear with me for one moment. Okay, so I've just moved right to my table here, and there we go. And what you're seeing here in front of on my table right now is one of the demos from the class, and this one is just a rose demonstration I made using 3 colors, and those 3 colors are right here in these little bowls. I was trying out new colors from Daniel Smith, and I managed to get paint on my thumb, which is par for the course. I was using Wisteria Rose Madder Permanent and the Aussie Red Gold, and that's not in the right order. There we go. And just giving them a try, working with those 3 colors to paint roses. And I did add a little bit of green right towards the end of the painting, But as you can see, I was just playing with those colors and seeing what they would do. And we started this as a circle exercise, very similar to some of the exercises in my Lovely Loose Florals course. And so that was really a good way to loosen up and very freeing. And then we went on to doing a negative painting demonstration and doing some exercises with negative painting. And negative painting, I realized when I was teaching a group of junior high students that the term negative doesn't have the same meaning for them as it does for those of us who remember film photography and actually having negatives come out, out of your camera that needed to be developed. And these students had only heard the word negative as another way of saying no. So, it was interesting to just realize that when I say negative painting, they have no connotation of that whole what a negative would look like. And so anyhow, we did some negative painting. This is a really good exercise to kind of help you learn to see like an artist and kind of turn off your brain and focus on painting around objects and not painting the objects themselves. And I do talk about that in my color drenched florals course, and we do some negative painting exercises there. This painting's not finished. I will be continuing that and developing those shapes further. I've got some beautiful little bell-shaped flowers in that corner. And then the final one, and I think this is my favorite, this is just a bouquet of flowers that I had there. I'd purchased it at the grocery store, and it really wasn't much of a flower arrangement. Most of the flowers were starting to get a little withered, and they just looked kind of sad. They weren't very high quality arrangement. And so the cool thing about that, of course, is with painting flowers, you get to make them look as fancy and exotic as you like. And so I had a really enjoyable time with just taking my time and just teasing out some flower shapes. And it was so meditative and gentle and beautiful. And I wanted to, it's addictive because I want to do more of that. I really felt like I was connecting with the flowers. Kind of you're touching them with love to be all, sentimental about it, and then putting that into your painting. And when you're able to make that connection, your painting just flows so much more smoothly. And Jean Haynes will talk about, stroking the rose petal. And when you're painting animals, you're almost like you're petting them. And so, we can have that feeling of an intimate connection with the objects that we're painting, which I think is really inspiring. And so today I thought I would move over and paint this stem of orchids. And aren't these beautiful? And these orchids, are another beautiful tropical bloom, which really goes well with my tropical online course. And my tropical holiday course, which is available on my website at learn.angelafehr.com. And I love orchids. Something you might not know about me is that I grow orchids, and some with varying degrees of success because I'm really not a very good gardener. But orchids are actually pretty easy to grow, at least some varieties, and even in our northern area. And so I like that I'm able to paint orchids grow orchids and then paint them because they're a bloom that lasts for a really long time. They've got this beautiful shape. This stem, it was just a single stem I bought at the grocery store as well. It's a pretty good grocery store. And I've been enjoying those flowers. I've taken them to the workshop and they were in the cold, and so they've gotten a little shrivelly around the edges. They're just on the way out, I think, starting to fade. So it's a good time to paint them, although I won't be painting every single orchid on this stem. I think I'll enjoy painting them better if I just focus on drawing out the shapes of one or two. So I'm just going to get my materials prepared and we'll just start. And we might not get very far. I want to paint these in a loose and fluid way. And when you're painting loose and fluid, it's really important to relax, to look for that, like I said, that intimate connection. And I mean, we can't talk to the orchids. We can't, I don't know, you can't get to know them like you would a person, which is, of course, a pretty obvious thing to say. But you can, really study them and really try to the grace and beauty that you see in the flowers, try to infuse that into your brush strokes. And that's what makes a floral painting sing, I think, is when you can find that attitude of that object you're painting and try to include that in how you paint them. So I'm just gonna check my video settings one more time, and then we'll try to get going. Yeah. And yeah. Sheesh, why is it not working? Oh, I know. Okay. So if you're just joining me now, which might be the case for a few of you. Okay, if you're just joining me now, looks like you are. I'm just about to start painting these beautiful orchids, and we had a little trouble today with the live stream. First, we started off on the scheduled stream, which was having video issues, and so now I've moved over to the live stream on the page, and then it took me a few minutes to adjust my settings. So I apologize for the stress for everyone. It's and I still think we're not going to have the clearest video, so we're just going to make it work today. And just leave it at that. And if it's not fantastic, well, the good news is I can paint these again, and every time I paint something, I get a little bit better at it, so the next time would be even better. And I hope you guys have that attitude about your painting as well, that every time you paint something, you get to know it a little better, and you can trust that that great thing that you just painted that you're really proud of, it's not the last wonderful thing you're ever going to paint. So I have this beautiful... I found this beautiful orchid at the grocery store in the floral section, and I just had to buy it. I'm not allowed to buy any more orchid plants because I have about 9 of them, and this year they're not wanting to grow for me very well. But I love orchids. One thing I love about them is they last for so long once they start blooming, and in our area where it's cold, 9 months of the year, it's really nice to have beautiful color in the house to enjoy all year round, and that's one reason I love painting flowers. So I'm going to try to put these somewhere where you guys can still kind of see them as I paint them. And today I'm painting intuitively, and that means I'm going to try to, and in fact I'm going to snap one of these guys right off the stem. I'm going to try to pick one that is still got a pretty good shape to it. How about this guy? He was kind of in the middle where he wasn't being appreciated anyhow. I want to really feel like I'm getting to know my orchid as I paint it. And orchid has, we could count the petals, and we will, but I think that right now, first what I want to look at is the overall shape. And I was telling my students in my watercolor class on the weekend as we were painting flowers that we have this tendency to right away go straight for the details. And rather, we should be looking at the overall shape as though we were standing maybe quite a distance away and only seeing the vaguest of details. So let's say we're standing, and we'll exaggerate, let's say we're standing a mile away. What would we see? Or 500 yards away. And we would see, of course, the overall color. We probably wouldn't see the little yellow bits that are inside. And we would see maybe that it has a bottom shape and a top shape, you know, that kind of widens out here. So when we're painting, we want to paint that kind of distance view first. And I'm going to grab my brush. And today I'm painting on Arches 140-pound rough. And I'm going to grab a little bit of Bordeaux by Daniel Smith. Isn't that a beautiful color? And isn't it fairly close to our orchid color? And as we add water, I think we'll see it even more. And there's more than one way to paint this. I could just paint one large shape that's kind of overall the orchid. The problem with that is we're on a live broadcast, and if I want to put any detail strokes in, it's going to take a while for that layer to dry. And so what I'm actually going to do is just try to suggest some of the outer shapes just to start with. We'll get that initial upper shape in. And there's kind of a little bulge there with, it's kind of whitish at the top. So we're going to give a little curve there where that is. And paint around that little throat, kind of there. And that's a guideline for my own information. So that means that line is not going to be permanent. In fact, I might want to soften it right away, just so it doesn't dry and create a crisp edge. And so that gives me the very beginnings of my orchid shape. What do you think? I'm already liking the beginning of the shape that I'm getting here. And that just got a little bit more vibrant. It's not quite as purpley as my first stroke. So I don't know if there's a little bit of something else mixed in there. So I might want to tweak those colors in a minute. And again, no panic, it's got time to dry. And my shape isn't flawless either. I'm seeing, you know, I could maybe adjust this initial first stroke. But I love this stroke, and I'm very committed to first strokes because that very first brush stroke kind of sets the tone for the whole painting, and I like what it did. So I'm going to just leave it for now. Even though it's not the most proportional, it could maybe be wider to balance out these bottom shapes. The other thing I see is I want some color to flow into that throat of the flower because, yeah, I want that color to flow into the throat of the flower because we need that little hint of color in there. And there's actually quite a bit of rich dark color in there that we would save, of course, toward the end. The one thing is, if we're painting from far away at this stage, if we're imagining ourselves standing at quite a distance, we don't want to get caught up in detail. It's like if you're standing there looking at a mountain far in the distance, but instead of painting the mountain, you're painting the bees on the flowers in the mountain, which you can't even see from that distance. That would just be foolish. So we imagine we're standing at a distance so that we can paint just the larger overall effect, and then get in a little closer and keep adding successive details. I just added, okay, so the burgundy I've been using, it's kind of a burgundy, it's called Bordeaux from Daniel Smith. And then I just added a little bit of, I think that's sap green, mixed with a little bit of quinacridone deep gold, and it gives that a little bit of yellow, and it has a little bit of that whoosh effect where you get some beautiful movement from your color as well. I'm going to take a little bit of yellow, and I think in this case I'm going to use my Nicolezo gold, or Nicolezo yellow. I always want to say gold. And I'm just going to dot that into the throat of my flower. And it's got some movement, so right away it whooshes across the page as well. And that's going to be the base of one orchid. And I do have this whole giant stem here. So then do I decide to, you know, give them some room to breathe? Or maybe I want to paint one from a different angle. And turning them on their side, you get a whole different look. So maybe we'll paint one from the side over here. And I'm going to give it a stem so that I know where it starts. And add a little more color to that. That's nice. Notice how much I use the side of my brush when I'm painting. That's one reason I love this big rigger brush. This is made by Escoda, Versatile. And it really gives me some beautiful shapes when I'm painting with just the side of my brush. I'm going to add a little bit of ultramarine to my palette just to make that Bordeaux a little bit more soft and purpley. I'm going to touch some into this flower. And then I'm going to start the next one. And this guy's got a swoopy petal going straight up, so I'm going to do that one first. And then another one that kind of you see from the side. And when you're looking at stuff, you know, from the side, you don't see a lot of that petal. It just changes. The change of the angle gives us, you know, a very different view and shape. And I love the angle of the throat of the flower here too. It just gives, again, a different perspective. And I think it kind of curves from the top. And again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to paint around it. And then I have this little hint of petal peeking out on this side. And then more of that beautiful speckled throat visible. So we'll paint that in a minute. But that's really not a complicated shape when you start to break it down. I'm loving you guys' chat. I wish I could take part a little bit more. I appreciate how supportive you guys are of me and of each other as well. I think that's one of, you know, I say this all the time. I'm a very social person. Artists spend a lot of time alone in the studio. And so for me to be able to come here and interact with you guys is a real treat for me. I feel the burden of having to make everything work every week and trying to make it work better every week. But I sure appreciate that you guys make it pretty easy for me to do. There's a couple things that are happening that I'm not crazy about over here on this throat of this flower. I'm not really loving how the bottom came together. And but I don't want to tweak it now. If you can, I don't know how closely you can see. I'm going to maybe try and pull this a little closer to the camera. Because if you can see right here where the stem meets the petals, there's this little bleedy mark where the colors are kind of pushing against each other and in a kind of blotchy way. And I don't think it's very beautiful at all. So, so there's a couple things you can do when that's happening. And one thing is, you know, I'm talking about painting loosely and trying to be kind of intimate with the flower and relaxed. And so I don't like to panic ever, but you know, you keep an eye on things. And so one thing I would just do is maybe just soften away that bleed. And just with this, while it's still damp, with the tip of your brush, without adding additional water, so I blotted my brush first, you can just brush against it with the tip of your brush, and that just softens that little edge that was happening there. Starting to get some sunshine in the studio, which is welcome, only I think it makes it difficult for you guys to see. I'm going to add some of the details to the throat of the flower here, and it just rolled away on me. There we go. And again, I say again because I do feel like I repeat myself, but whether it was today in this broadcast or in previous lessons, I really couldn't say. But really, I don't want to paint more than I have to. That means holding back. And in watercolor, you guys know this, the tendency is to overwork. So we want to show restraint. Spend more time thinking and looking than you do painting when you're painting loosely. And you really can't go wrong. It's never a mistake to pause and examine before you continue. So I'm just mixing some more of that Bordeaux with some ultramarine blue. And I think I'm going to grab a smaller brush. I want to do a little bit of spatter to create my little throat spots there, whatever you want to call them. That seems like a silly word. And so I've just grabbed a nice script brush from Escoda. It's a number 2, but really there's lots of different sizes. There's no, and there's not a huge lot of difference between them. And I'm just going to dot in with my script brush some of the larger speckles that I see on the flower. And some of them are going to touch against that damp petal that's around the edge. And I want that to happen because I think it's pretty. And it unifies the shapes. I don't want the throat of the flower, because it is different, to stand out as though it doesn't belong. I want everything to be incorporated together. And so that means letting some things bleed and flow. And then I'm wondering about spatter. And spatter, you'll get different effects with different brushes. Because these aren't very big, this brush, or the flowers aren't very big, we don't want to overdo our spatter. But I do kind of want some of that spray to fall outside of the flower area. And it's just a playful thing to do, so you don't have to feel stressed about it. But again, a light touch is usually the best option if you're uncertain. You know, it just takes a little bit to give those suggestions. Over here where I'm adding those little dots, there's quite a bit of dampness in the petals, so there's going to be a lot of bleeding happening at this stage. And I don't know. I think probably waiting a little bit for some of that would be a good idea. And when you're spattering, you don't need to use really pure color. Sometimes I really will water down a puddle of paint so that I can spatter a very light spatter of color. And that just gives, you know, a softer effect than big dominant drops. Okay, just looking at my orchids, there's stuff that needs to happen once they're dry. And I always think it's a good idea to pause and let things settle on their own. There's some really nice things happening too. I'm going to lift this paper up so you guys can see it a little bit more closely and try to hold it still at the same time. Over here on the second flower, the one on the left, because I had mixed that border with a bit of ultramarine, the colors as they dry, they kind of separate a little bit, they granulate. And so you can see little flecks of blue in that pinky violet, which is just beautiful. And that's one reason I like ultramarine. It's a granulating color that creates that beautiful texture as it dries. And there's little mixes of color in both the flowers here. And I'm not going to paint any more right now. This is just a little sketch. This is the kind of thing that I would do in getting to know these flowers. And maybe down the road, it would be really nice to take this big stem of orchids and do like a tall, narrow floral, because you don't see a lot of tall, narrow floral paintings. And so it would be unusual and interesting. And so, you know, something like this would happen in preparation for a larger composition. And as you get to know a flower, and I find some flowers to be very intimidating, my lilies that I pulled out earlier, these lilies, I have been terrified of painting lilies for decades. And so to be able to create this beautiful first wash of lilies, and I feel like this painting does need a little bit more detail added, but I really love the way that lily came out, and I don't want to touch it very much. But it took me a long time of just trying different ways of painting this slightly more difficult shape. I mean, roses are just round, and then here you have a lily that has a very pronounced shape. And so that was something I struggled with for a long time. So, you know, every time you paint something, you're getting more comfortable with it. You're learning to observe it. You're trying out different ways of depicting it. And so you can have confidence that it gets easier as you practice. And that's how I feel about these orchids too. The better I get to know them, the better they're going to turn out. So I apologize again, everybody, for all the technical difficulties. And one day, perhaps I will be able to have, afford a great big crew to come out and run this all for me, and then I can just focus on doing the painting and live my life in the clouds. But up until then, I'm quite thankful that I'm able to at least turn a camera on and hopefully keep things running well enough so that we can connect. I'm going to take a look at you guys' questions here, and again, I appreciate you guys showing up. The recording will be available after the broadcast for about a week. And my sun is getting brighter, which makes it more difficult to see as well. I wanted to show you guys something, and I have a book recommendation as well. So just set this aside for a second. This little palette right here was made for me by a friend, a potter friend of mine, and I really love it. I'm excited about it. I had seen something on the internet where a potter had made uh, a palette, and I right away contacted my friend Marilyn, and I'm like, do you think you could make one for me? And so she put her own style on it and glazed it so that it's resistant and the paint doesn't absorb in. What I like about this is these are 3 new colors. This is the Bordeaux over here. I'm not sure where they're going to go in my usual palette, and so for now I can try them out in here and put a little dab of paint in, and I have this, I don't know, I just think it's so pretty, and I'd love to I don't know, have a whole bunch of these beauties just because I have a little bit of a pottery addiction. And then I also want to recommend a book today, and this one actually we talked about on my Facebook group, Angela Fehr Watercolor Workshop, which anybody is welcome to join. You don't have to be enrolled in my paid classes to be a part of that Facebook group. So just look me up on Facebook and you'll see the group there. This is the Watercolor Artist's Flower Handbook, and I've had this book for over 10 years. I always write the year when I buy a book inside the cover, so I know how long I've had it. And I just bought it in our local bookstore. But what I love about this book is it's by Patricia Seligman, and I will have a link to it on Amazon after the broadcast is finished. But what I love about this book is that she doesn't just show her own flower paintings, but she shows work by many other floral artists. And so you see different styles. This one's Sharon Himes. There's work by Anne Blockley in here, Frida Cox, a whole bunch of names. This is Anne Blockley's. You can see there's a very strong negative painting technique there, and talking about interpreting flowers, and she shares different techniques. My favorite is somewhere in here. Oh yeah, Jane Lester Page. Lester Page. I was given a pronunciation guide from a British friend. And I love her negative painting, and I love the different styles that these artists all show. And so if you want to be inspired, it's just a little book, which I like as well. So many times they're just big and bulky. This I could almost tuck in my purse. And it's a pretty book, and then just lots of floral inspiration. So if you're looking for flower painting, different ways of painting flowers, this is really a useful book. And I don't know, just enjoyable. I'm not even sure if it's in print anymore, but it is still available to be ordered online. I've seen it a few different places on Amazon. And just wrapping up, folks. The author of the book is Patricia Seligman, and I will have a link on my description of this video just at the end of the broadcast. I appreciate everyone's checking in and sharing your comments on the chat. It's always fun to connect with you guys. I'm seeing a few other questions, and I'm going to try to connect with you guys again a little later in the week. Also, I'm trying to revive my blog at angelafehr.com. What I'd really like to do is just periodically, share stuff that you can kind of read at your leisure instead of having to show up on the internet at a certain time every week. But just, again, it's been really nice to connect with you guys. Thank you for your patience on the broadcast. And we're gonna do this again, and it's gonna work better because I just have to get better at this at some point. Anyhow, you guys have a great day, and I wish you the best for the rest of the week. Down in the description of the video, a link to my interview with the local TV station. That was for the opening of my solo show. And in the interview, I just share a little bit about why I paint what I do and what I love about watercolor. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure to check out that link as well. You guys have a great week, and see you next